Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Become a Toastmasters Brand Ambassador webinar with our District 4 PR Manager, Joe Bresler. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be shared later on our District 4 YouTube webpage and most likely through an email for you to view later. If we could get the next slide, please, Joe.
Oh, yep.
Just a few little webinar logistics. We are planning on having about 30 to 40 minutes of content with some Q&A. I will be your check chair and moderator. I am Jennifer Perry-Ruzick, the Club Growth Director for District 4. We ask that you please stay muted with your videos off and use the chat function to communicate with us. If you do turn on your video, you do consent to be recorded. With that, I would like to pass it over to our PR manager, Joe.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone for joining tonight. Just a little bit about me. I'm Joe Bresler, and I've led marketing initiatives for over 2 decades. Everything that I've done has been around my passion for helping companies and products get out to market, grow, and globalize. These are some of the things that I've developed a lot of skills around. I'm happy to bring those skills here as well to District 4 Toastmasters. In particular, one of the things that I've noticed over the last several months being the PR manager is, especially with COVID, the game has changed. And what I've found is that as public relations managers, we're needing to now respond in a little bit different way. We're needing to think more on a global basis. We're needing to think more about how we compete versus other clubs and other districts, because the whole COVID situation has made this a real equalizer. So people from all over the world can come in to a meeting or to an event from anywhere, and they can join clubs, they can drop clubs. It's a situation now where clubs really need to be at the top of their game, and the PR team or PR manager needs to be also at the top of their game to really help to make sure that they are getting people into the club and helping them to have a good experience. And there's lots of different ways to do that. What I wanted to make sure that we understand, though, tonight is, although I am here presenting to you a presentation about branding, I very deliberately and specifically said I actually am going to break format. I'm actually not using the Toastmasters presentation template. You may have noticed that right off. And that's because I don't want there to be any confusion with regards to club officer training. This is not a club officer training, and it does not take the place of everyone's obligation to go to club officer training twice a year. All right, this is supplemental that I'm doing as a PRM and as a marketer to help us here at District 4 to be able to compete better. Okay, with that said, these are some of the things that we're going to be able to cover tonight. We're going to just go through a little bit about branding basics. And I'm going to make that section in particular very interactive. I'd love to hear from all of you, and it'll be a little bit of a warm-up. I want to talk a little bit about demographics. This is information that's from headquarters. And then I'm going to dive into the brand guidelines. So how I've designed this session would be that we do that warm-up and we get people in the mindset of branding. And then we actually go and we look at the brand guidelines and we have further discussions around that. I would say the portion of the presentation where it'll be more around me presenting out to you will be during that brand guidelines section. We'll talk a little bit about recommendations. I'll show you some resources, and then we'll have an open discussion just to finish everything off. That'll be the run of the night tonight. And we're going to try to get you out by 6:30 or sooner. What I'd like to do would be to have you all turn on your videos and open up your microphones. And I'd like to have a very brief discussion here up front. I've actually chosen my favorite car manufacturer and my favorite beverage, but I want to hear from many of you. We'll cover very briefly, let's say we're going to give about 5 minutes, 4 minutes, something like this, to hear from several of you in the audience about your favorite car manufacturer, or your favorite beverage. Why that's your favorite, what you get out of it, or why it actually resonates with you. Do we have any volunteers who would like to get started? And you can either raise your hand physically if we can see you on video, or raise your hand virtually through the platform. Otherwise, we can choose people as well. I see Steve. Thanks for joining, Steve. Good to see you. Go ahead and take yourself off of mute.
I am off.
There you go. Talk to me, Steve. What's your favorite one? Is you want to talk about cars, or you want to talk about beverages?
We'll talk about beverages.
Okay, sounds good.
My favorite beverage is, alcoholic beverage at least, is beer.
Okay.
Why beer? Well, because I'm a home brewer.
Ah.
I make my own beer. And that all started with my daughter, who gave me some used home brewing equipment in the hopes that she would get free beer. And it worked out well for her. She gets free beer all the time. So
now, Steve, is there a brand of craft beer that is always your go-to when you go out and buy your beer in the store?
Used to be Lagunitas.
Lagunitas. Okay. Why is that?
Because it was local. And
okay.
One would be Firestone Walker, also because it's local California.
Okay. So that's something that's important to you, something that has a local flavor. Were the different aspects of the beer or the packaging or any advertising that really made you feel like, wow, I can really identify with them?
Well, initially, when Lagunitas, when it was privately owned, was very kind of disrespectful, off the, not so much doing it for the money, but doing it because they wanted to do it.
All right. So bringing forward their passion for the beer. That's what I'm hearing from you on that one. Thank you so much for sharing that, Steve.
Sure.
What about an additional person? Are there any others who want to share about their favorite brand? And we're just going to stick with cars or with beverages. So what's your go-to beverage, your go-to car brand, and why? I see smiling faces, but I don't see hands. So we may need to select a few people.
And Greg both had their hands up.
Who was the first one?
Matthew?
Matthew. Okay, Matthew Lim.
Well,
Why don't we go ahead with you?
I'll defer it to Greg.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. My favorite beverage is something called Mu Tea, MU, and it's called also 16 Herbs Tea. And the reason why I liked it so much is because I grew up with it.
Okay.
So I didn't notice any advertising. Our parents had it, and I like it.
Okay, so that's your favorite go-to brand. And you have some positive, how I'm hearing it from you is that you've grown up with this brand. It's been a part of your life for a long time. And that's been a positive experience for you.
That's right.
All right, awesome. Do we have one more person? Maybe somebody who has a car brand that you go to. Anybody want to take a car brand? I can't see everybody, so I don't know for sure. Why don't we go with Denise? Sorry, Denise. Either you or John. I know John as well. So, or even Robert. I know Robert's kind of smiling over there. So not to say people have to frown. I appreciate the smiles, but I wanted to make sure that we do keep the session running.
Okay, well, I guess as far as car manufacturer, we both my husband and I have Subarus, different models. So I guess we're gonna have to say Subaru. We've had other models in the past, and I know so far it seems to be working out well for us. I bought mine two and a half years ago, and he bought his about a year and a half ago, and both not by choice, but other cars just, well, mine just died. So one day, so I had to get a new car. So
But that was the first one you considered then. So you reconsidered Subaru the next time after your car died. Is that right?
Right, because yeah, the last time I had a Hyundai and I liked it, but yeah, I thought might as well go for something different this time.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so you actually switched brands
Yes.
in that case. So maybe they didn't quite get your loyalty at Hyundai quite as much as they would have liked.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
sort of what I'm hearing.
I mean, I liked the Hyundai. I had it for, oh gosh, 11 and a half years. So I really liked it, but I don't know, I guess, wanted to try something different. And my husband did some research and, saw that Subaru is a good brand, and he ended up buying one the following year. So
Okay. Was there something that really tipped him over the edge when he saw something when he was doing the research? Was it one attribute, or was it maybe an image? Anything, a tagline, anything he encountered?
I don't have to ask him. I think it was the price. There was like a, the price is really good. And he went to this website, I think called truecar.com.
Okay.
And they had a really good special for Subarus at that time for.
Okay, so it made sense to you then. So
yeah,
some of the things I heard were perhaps, hopefully I'm not putting too much of words in your mouth. Some things you considered were, first off, you switched brands. You were actually influenced as a consumer by somebody else who was close to you, in this case, your husband. You had done some research, so it was more of a considered purchase. Took a little bit of time to consider that. One of the factors was price, and I'm going to assume price versus value, because you were actually willing to pay a certain price to get a certain value out of that transaction. And the other thing that I heard from you was that you looked for some social proof, and that there were others who were advocates that helped to support your decision or maybe even convince you. Would that be accurate?
I don't know about other people other than my husband.
Okay, but he had gone online and he had seen maybe some reviews, things like this, right?
Yeah, that's probably what he did is he saw some good reviews and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome. All of these are aspects of branding and developing a brand. That's why I wanted to go through that exercise, because we may not realize it, but every day companies are making an impression on us, and they're helping us to have an experience with them that we identify with, and that we have this affinity with them at that point. And in many cases, they actually become part of our lives. For me, I'll tell you a couple of brands that I admire, because sometimes people, as a marketer, sometimes people ask me, which brands do you admire? Which ones do you think are really out there crushing it or killing it? Especially in high tech, you hear people use a little bit more of what I'll call swashbuckling terms. They like to say these things, crushing it, whatever. So first one for me would be Coca-Cola. The reason why I like Coca-Cola versus other brands, now granted, Coca-Cola is basically a conglomerate of brands at this point, but I thought that this was really relevant. They've done two things here when I looked at their website. First off, they're trying to help to show the diversity of the audience that they serve, especially in the panel to my left, where there's a URL just underneath it. So they're trying to show inclusiveness, and they're trying to show that it has a broad appeal. The second thing that struck me is, now this was actually a scrolling web page, so I could scroll up, and something that really hit me, especially when I'm thinking about branding, is this tagline, this headline, which was crafting brands and choices people love. And what they're doing there is they're helping people understand that each one of these is its own unique brand. It's got its own unique identity. You can see here in the picture, there are several different examples of that. There's a traditional Coke bottle, there's orange juice, and so on. But what they're really trying to get to is to that point where their product becomes part of your life and you develop that affinity with them and you love them. And then at some point, you potentially become an advocate as well. That I feel that Coca-Cola, at least in my opinion, does a really good job of this. The next one for me that resonates for me is BMW. I bought my first BMW many years ago. So similar to Denise, she's had a couple of Subarus. And this brand has resonated with me for quite some time. I think I'm on my third or fourth BMW, maybe fourth, maybe fifth at this point. They've lasted well. They've been very reliable. What really resonates about this brand with me is, and they actually had this in one of their taglines recently, they talk about performance and they talk about a balance between art and basically art and science, bringing those two together. And at least for me, when I think about my own background and what I do as a marketer and as a person in general, I generally like to acknowledge those two sides of my personality and bring them together. And I feel that BMW does a great job of that as well. They also want to make sure that they're showing that they're making an impact in the community, as you can see here on the left panel. And then they also have this aura about how can you essentially push the limits a bit and get high performance out of your vehicle, but still keep it legal. So still not break the law. So, and that's me. So I like to push the performance a bit, but I don't want to break the law. There are two brands that resonate with me, and as you can see, I've actually incorporated the thoughts about these brands into my life, and so I've just explained to you how they resonate with me and how they really become part of what how I identify and how I identify with them as well. So different organizations can express their brands in different ways, but the usual ways are the visual appearance and that personality that they convey to you through visuals. They generally put forward their beliefs, what they stand for, and what type of an impact that they make on others or on the community. Sometimes this comes out in ways like through a mission or a vision in the value statements. Some companies are much better at putting those out to market than others. But typically what you'll want to do when you're doing branding is you will want to make sure that your branding and your brand strategy, your message is all grounded in your overall mission, your vision, and your values. What they do then with telling their brand story is just that. They tell their story. And that story can be multifaceted and it can be told in many different ways. So it's all about how they tell it. That's them speaking out to you as a brand. But it's also about how we're impacted by that brand and how that brand and the brand promise is realized by us. Sometimes you'll hear in the marketing world, you hear about things like brand experience. And really, when I think about brand experience, I think about that as how the brand is showing up across all the different places that I see them. And it's how I, as an individual, experience that brand. Have I had a good impression with them? Have I felt like I've gotten some value? Do I feel like the things that they're telling me are resonating? What's the feeling that I get? Have I developed an affinity to that brand? And do I have any loyalty? So we had Denise here mention earlier about Hyundai, but she switched. Ideally, a brand would keep you locked in over the longer term, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes people's preferences change, sometimes life changes, and sometimes people are influenced by other things. But the point about branding is just trying to make sure that you can develop enough of a relationship and enough loyalty so that you can keep people around for the longer term. And that you as an individual will start to identify with that brand. And what then will happen is you'll actually make it your own. You will have absorbed that information about the brand and how they're showing up, and you'll start to identify that as part of your life as well. All right. I mentioned earlier about how this can then come about, how brands communicate their information and their values. That's through the visual identity, their message, and their storyline. But one key point here is it's really important to have a good knowledge. If you're a brand, you really have to have a good knowledge of your target audience. So you can have a great story, but if you don't know who you're telling it to, it's going to fall flat 9 times out of 10. In fact, there are a few companies I've worked with, whether it's through doing consulting or whether it's being in-house, where they've really struggled with understanding and identifying their target audience. And sometimes you might hear me, if we get into a separate conversation around marketing, you might hear me talk about what's called an ICP or an ideal customer profile. All right, but that's all about targeting and the target audience. So it's the message, the visuals, the design, the identity, and then it's making sure it lands properly with the right audience, with the ones that you want to attract more of. Now, here's just a little point. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that this is, although I'm here tonight as a District 4 PRM, this is not an official PRM or VP PR training, meaning that it doesn't supplant, it doesn't replace the traditional Toastmasters VP PR trainings. So just wanted to reiterate that today. That's why you're seeing that I'm actually breaking the brand by using a different template for the presentation. If it was truly a fully official training, then I would just go ahead and use the brand. And frankly, I struggled with that a little bit before I did the presentation, but I figured it's best just to keep these things separated. But when I think about my responsibilities as a PRM, and this is straight out of the Toastmasters playbook, so to speak, the first thing that comes to mind and the first thing that's on that webpage is protect and uphold the brand, or protect the Toastmasters brand. There's lots of different ways that they train us on this at the district level. The next thing, of course, is raising awareness, communicating that story and the values. And then the other piece that I like to do is empower and encourage the advocacy of others. So that's why I'm running this session tonight, is to really help you understand more about the brand of Toastmasters, and so that you can then go and become brand advocates. And we're going to go through the Toastmasters branding, the primary brand manual in a few moments, but this is really the heart of what I'm trying to do here tonight. Okay, I talked a moment ago about who are our target audience and really what are those demographics. So when I think about how do I describe a target audience, I think about things like there's demographics, which would be what do the people look like? There's firmographics, which would be if I'm going into a company and I'm trying to market into a company, then what does the company look like? And then there are also other things in marketing like psychographics, and there's a whole bunch of things. So probably more of a topic for a broader marketing discussion. But if I just simply lay out here where we're at with Toastmasters, this is information directly from the world headquarters as to what the Toastmasters demographics currently look like. And you're welcome to read this here. You can see most people are in the private or for-profit sector. There are a lot of people in business and financial operations and computer and information technology. I'd say probably in our district, we probably have a lot more people who are in the information technology space than there are in other districts. And then you can also look up at the top. So Toastmasters are generally fairly well educated. And okay, well, you know, some clubs might have a little bit younger of a demographic in terms of the age, but this is the average that Toastmasters is seeing across the board, across everybody who is identifying as a Toastmaster. And you can see here, male and female mix, kind of close, about, 8 to 10 points separated. But that's really what our Toastmasters demographics look like. I'm going to pause here for a minute because I want to hear from additional people. And I just want to ask the simple question. When you think about your club, the club that you belong to and that you attend on a regular basis, it might be possible you have multiple that you go to, pick one. How do these demographics compare to what you see at your club? And is there anyone who would like to share their viewpoint? Does it seem on track? Does it seem way off track?
I'll go.
All right.
Hey, yeah, so our average age is probably a little younger than that.
Okay.
My club club's about 10, 12 members or on any given year or whatever. I would say the language looks about right. About half of our members are multilingual or more. I don't know exactly, but I know at least half of our members, and I've been in the club for a couple of years, are not American born.
Okay.
So that looks to be accurate. And then, yeah, it's fairly, I don't know about all their industries, but yeah, I would agree with you in that there's probably more people in the information technology sector than 14%. So.
Okay. Awesome, John. And just so other people know, which club do you represent tonight?
I am at Monday Night Live, which is here in San Francisco.
Okay.
Formerly known as GGU.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, John. Is there one other person who wants to share their perspective when they think about these demographics that we presented here and they think about their club? Anyone else would like to share?
I think that especially as you look at small clubs, you're going to get potentially a lot more deviation from this.
Yes, which club or not do you represent, and what do you see that might be different for your club?
I'm actually a member of 2 clubs, but one of them is small. It's called Toasters Digest.
Okay.
I would say that our average age is younger than that. Probably
Okay.
lower to mid 30s.
All right.
Education level is probably about right. With respect to language, I actually don't know who is bilingual or multilingual. I would say most of us are either foreign born or second generation immigrant. For a small club, it turns out the gender is not right, but it's a small club, so maybe if it were to grow, we would start to see things balance out close and converge towards these sorts of numbers.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Anat. I really appreciate that. So I've heard from 2 folks here in this segment that it's their observation in their clubs that the age range for their clubs might be a little bit lower. That's perfectly fine. These are just the numbers that are reported across the entire globe by world headquarters. With that, I would like to say, though, keep that in mind as we start to go through the brand manual and start to think about, because what I want to do when I present the brand manual, and we're going to jump into that in just a moment here, what we're going to cover are going to be these areas. So the brand platform, the voice and tone, the visual design and imagery, logo usage, resources, and getting approvals. But what I'd like you to think about is the following, and this goes for everybody. Now, for me, I've put together brand guidelines, brand manuals, and I've trained people on branding in the past. And what I always say is there's a certain level of consistency that we want, but there's also a certain level of playing or fiddling with the brand for our audience. As long as we're having some level of consistency, then we're good. But we can certainly have a little bit more fun. One of the things I think about is if you know the guidelines, then you also can be more deliberate about breaking them or modifying things in such a way that it resonates with your audience. So I'm not going to advocate here. I'm sure world headquarters would say, don't break the brand guidelines. I'm not setting up a policing type of a scenario here as well. Everybody will need to police themselves. But all I'm saying here is that you may need to take a little bit slightly different approach and then try to reconcile for yourself when are the times when you need to ask for help or ask questions, and when are the times when you can do things a little bit differently, and it's going to be just fine. All right. So let's actually dive into the brand guidelines now. Give me 1 second here as I break out of this. Okay. And I'm going to just close those ones and I'm going to go to the brand manual. Okay, and you all can still see the screen, right? Okay, and what I'm going to do is, I know that there may be some folks who are maybe kind of chomping at the bit to get into those brand guidelines, and maybe you haven't seen them before, or maybe you have, but you just need a refresher, and that's all good. I've just put the link in the chat. I'll also have it in the follow-up as well. But this is the latest and greatest brand guidelines or brand manual that I wanted to walk you through. And when I took the role of PRM this year, they also walked us through the manual as well. And again, I want to mention that, let's actually even just start with a cover. If I look here, although I just showed you what the demographics are, especially around age range, as reported by World Headquarters, let's take a look at what's happening even on the cover. We have someone who is probably fairly early in their career. We have someone who may be maybe the middle of their career, and someone who might be middle or maybe upper in their career. So we have a very wide range of people that are represented in Toastmasters. That's something that we embrace. And that should be reflective of the population as well. All right, how to use this guidelines or this manual. This is it. I've given you the link. Let's start first with the brand platform. There is a tagline where leaders are made. Short and simple, easy to roll off your tongue. You can use it where necessary, and there are further guidelines down below. There are core values. I talked earlier about the values of the brand and what we want to have people identify with, and things that we want to communicate and how we want to communicate, whether it's visually or through verbal communication, or whether it's through written communication. Those values are integrity, respect, service, and excellence. Those are the core values of the Toastmasters brand. And then, of course, there's the brand promise, which is really how we take things like the mission, the vision, and the values, and we boil it down to a brand promise. This is really what we're trying to do as an overall brand, is empower individuals through personal and professional development, and really supporting their professional growth. Okay, so that's the core of it. That's setting the stage for everything else that comes. Then when we think about the brand platform, this is really important, especially as VP PRs or PRM, or even those who might be in your teams who are helping you with the activities of promoting club contests. That's one of the things that we're in the middle of right now, promoting special events and so forth. Just thinking about the personality. And something to consider as well here is take a look, to always be very mindful of the imagery that we're using as well. But the personality, what's being asked of us here is that we reflect that personality through all of our different communications, whether it's social media, internal communications just within the club or the district, and beyond. And then the voice and tone is also important, because that helps us think about, how do we want to write social posts? How do we want to write press releases? How do we want to write our other forms of communication that we use? In this case for Toastmasters, we want that communication to be confident, have compassion, be clear yet respectful, friendly and professional, positive, upbeat, and enthusiastic, but serious when necessary, always open to exchange. Those are some critical things to think about when we're writing for our club, whether it's social posts or other things that we're working on. Okay, they go a little bit more deeply here into voice and tone. We talked about some of the values before, so warm, clear, friendly, professional, succinct. What they suggest here is that you use this almost like a checklist, and you could certainly do that. One thing that I'm going to comment on here, and I'll go into this further in other sessions, is internationally friendly. I really appreciated the comments earlier from the folks who spoke up and mentioned that they acknowledged and they agreed that many Toastmasters are multilingual. Maybe it's bilingual, maybe it's more than 2 languages. These days, since everybody's meeting online, people can come in to our meetings from anywhere. So we now need to start to think about how do we address an international audience? Whereas before COVID, it was purely a group of clubs that were very locally focused. So we had a lot more control of who was coming in. We knew people a little bit better. Now we are getting some more international attention and participation. So we need to think about international considerations as well. All right. In this section, I'm not going to go through it too much, but I will make a comment here. The logos, I'll make 2 comments. One is that logos are available for download. If you've gotten the link in the chat, then you could easily open up that file and click on toastmasters.org/logos. That's where you can download all the logo files. The one thing that they do give us guidance around is the usage of the logo at the district level and even at the club level. So typically what we'll do is, let me see if we have it here. We'll do something like this. So now we've had some debates as well at the district level. Basically what we would do is we would use this logo and we'd say District 4. We don't need to repeat District 4 Toastmasters because we've already got Toastmasters up here. And we can certainly use this tagline as well. And these are just various options that we have. So this one is a word mark, and that one's the actual logo. And there are different options you have there. I'll spend a moment here to show what the World Headquarters basically likes and doesn't like in terms of the guidelines. And I'll leave it to you to go into more depth here, but you can see some of the things that would not be appropriate for usage of the logo would be things like putting it into a perspective or warping it or stretching it, changing the color differently from what it's being delivered through Toastmasters, putting it on colors that are outside of the brand palette, and then doing things like making it essentially bedazzled. Okay, so those are some things to watch out for with the logo. The next thing will be around the primary colors. And here what they do is they give us the primary colors and they give a few different options. I would normally open this up just to ask questions, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through this very quickly. If you aren't familiar with using these colors, here's just very briefly how you use them. So a hex number is generally what's used on a website and could also be used on things like Google Slides. There are also other designations for color that are used for print and for other means of communicating. So CMYK is for print, RGB is generally for on screen, and then Pantone is a very specific matching format. It's a bit more complicated to go into detail here on this. What I would suggest would be, and I've done this as well, is if you have a webmaster, or if you're the webmaster and you're setting colors, or if you're using Google Slides, I typically use the hex numbers here in order to get those colors to use so I can use the proper colors. And it tells you a little bit here about how and when you use those colors and the designations and what they are. Okay, I'm going to speed up a little bit. So here's Pathways logos. You can look at that. Pathways badges, you probably won't be using those much. And then the fonts. And I think, Denise, you have a raised hand. Let's pause real briefly here. Denise, did you want to go back to logos and colors?
Yeah. Okay, now you're like, okay, let's say if I'm posting, like I post on Facebook. So am I supposed to stick to these colors if I'm posting, like just doing a post on Facebook about different things about the club?
It would be best if you're posting something official on behalf of Toastmasters that you at least incorporate these colors. What I would say would be to be careful. So there are some obvious colors that are not included here, like white or black.
Oh.
What I would say would be careful about doing things like adding pink. Like, I don't know if you can see my screen, but here's, I really wouldn't add that color.
Oh, okay.
Some brands, they allow you to basically screen the colors. So this is a yellow, but it's not happy yellow. But some brands, they actually allow you to take tones of colors.
Oh, okay.
And tones of yellow and tones of blue, just to properly represent the Toastmasters brand. I would say you're probably going to be good. Here's another color that I would not incorporate to just stay with. You can probably read all my notes there. But I probably would not incorporate like a purple like this if I were representing the Toastmasters brand and being that brand ambassador, trying to make sure that we're staying very consistent.
Oh, but I thought it was as long as you're not putting the logo, you're pretty flexible, but I guess I'm wrong.
Yeah, here would be the logo. So the main thing here with the logo would be don't change the logo colors.
Yeah, but if we're not
Okay.
like for example, if I'm just saying, like usually I just post about each meeting and say who the winners are, and I know I probably could be doing more to up the what I'm posting to attract more people, but I mean, I don't know, maybe I should get more help on that.
Well, there may be a gray area here, and what I'm going to say is that as long as you're not doing these types of things like
No, nothing like that. No.
Coming up with crazy colors,
No.
adding colors. You can even do things like, take one of these colors and use white and black.
Oh.
And use the yellow as an accent. You can have a little bit of flexibility and fun with it. My only thought would be that just avoid like a pink or a fluorescent green, things that are going to be obviously totally out of whack.
Yeah, because actually, well, like on Facebook, they only have like certain things backgrounds that you can use. And then after a point, after so many characters, any background goes away.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There may be some things that you might want to try. There are tools like Canva, for example, that can allow you to basically set up a little template, and then you can do a play on the colors as well. So if you noticed when I promoted this session, I used the blue as a background. I caught myself because I didn't get the blue right the first time, so I went back and fixed it. The next session has the maroon as the background, so I'm trying to just stay as true to that as possible. And I'm incorporating some of these other colors. Sometimes it's about adding colors or removing colors. It's more just around trying to avoid things like this one here.
Oh, yeah. I don't do anything like that.
Yeah.
No.
All right. Hopefully that was helpful for you. I know it can be hard to interpret it, but sometimes if you use tools like Canva or other things, like sometimes you might have Photoshop or others, then it will help you as well. I would say the next thing, thank you for that question. The next thing to keep in mind is the font. So sometimes I'll see script fonts or other fonts, and people love to do that. I have seen things where it's been a really very different font, very almost like handwritten, very thin font. But these are the official fonts. So Gotham, and that can be replaced by Montserrat. And then here is Myriad Pro, and that one can be replaced by Source Sans Pro. So as long as you get as close as possible to these, just notice that these are what's called a sans serif font, meaning that it's very clean and easy to read, and there aren't these little what's called serifs, these little things like feet and little tips that are added in here on fonts that might be like typewriter type of fonts. All right, and I'll let you explore that further as well. Images and photography. So once again, we have a younger demographic represented. So it's certainly possible that that's part of your target audience and part of your existing audience in your club. Something about images and photography is, I just wanted to point out here. First off, there are some images that are available in the photo gallery. There's a link here and this in the manual to go and download images. You can go and actually look through the images, see what you like, see what works. This is the thing that they say to stay away from. Let's cover the positive first. The positive is, think about and use imagery that's fairly clear. It reflects at a Toastmasters environment, like a club or a district level. People look engaged, they look empowered, they look supported. There might be meetings, presentations, speeches, networking events. Just stay away from things like landscapes, animals, children, food appliances, medicine, architecture. I would say the list would probably go on further. They do explicitly say, please do not use cartoons, illustrations, or clip art. So that means that they really do want you to stay more towards a photo. And I'm going to pause here real quickly because there are a few places where we can go online to get photos. You have to search for them. And I'm going to just do a random search. I'm just going to search on meeting. Let's say business meeting. And let me see what comes up. Okay, so a lot of things came up here, and I'm on a site called iStock Photo. There are a few others like Unsplash and Pixabay, but actually this one came up pretty good with some examples here. So business meeting, all these portray people in an office setting or an engaged setting. This is a place where people are networking. This one I would say was probably getting a little bit cluttered. But this is probably a nurturing environment. This is a place where people are engaging. Here's a presentation. All of these are the types of images that we can certainly use. This would definitely be on brand and more of what Toastmasters would like us to use. I'm just going to go do a random search on Unsplash, and I'll just say also.
So Joe, we also have another hand raised.
Okay. All right, go ahead. What's the question? How can I address that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead,
Okay.
David.
Yeah, it's in regards to these images, and what we do at our club, the Rainbow Toastmasters, an LGBTQ plus their friends club, is we have a theme every week. And so the picture is something related to that theme. So the photo we have running right now on Facebook events and paid ads, actually, because we had some money to do that, is a rainbow flag with the pi, the mathematical pi sign, because it's Pi Week, and played into the fact that, you know, your skills you learn at Toastmasters are never ending, and it goes throughout life, you know, like pi never ends. And so that's the type of picture we use. And then like during the Groundhog Day, we had the groundhog popping up, and it had something to do with, you know, it played again with Toastmasters, but something to do with the groundhog. Anyway, so every week we do that. And I do that on the meetup as well, because I do notice on meetup, a lot of clubs, it's just a picture of people. It's just a picture of people standing there with their flag, and it just doesn't pop. And so that's why we use those pictures. Are you saying I cannot, or is it okay to continue what we're doing?
I would say just as long as you follow the guidelines here. So try not to use cartoons, illustrations, or clip art. And then just try to make sure that it's projecting a professional image. If you do those two things, you're going to probably be very much in alignment with what the expectations would be.
How would I get clip art how can I not use clip art, especially if it's free or something?
Yeah,
because those are like unique pictures that are fun. I mean, there's some clip art in here, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm going through these sites, because you're going to need to go and do your own assessment, especially as a VP PR. Part of your responsibility is to uphold that brand, and part of that brand is the professional image. So these are a couple different sites here, like Pixabay, Unsplash, and then iStock Photo, where you can go and you can look for imagery. And then, like I mentioned before, you just have to watch out that you're not putting out clip art, illustrations, cartoons, those sorts of things. So if you need to do a little bit more like adding a flag or other things that will help you with reaching your target audience, again, it's probably a little bit of a gray area, but you could probably get away with it, especially if you're using, you know, some basis for that Toastmasters thing. Where I've seen some folks have a little bit more trouble is when I saw one come across at one point, I think it was on Facebook, and it looked a little bit more like a child's drawing of a house. And so that was basically an illustration. It also didn't really tie to the target audience, because it looked like it was basically drawn by a child and targeting a child. And that's something that we want to be careful of as well, especially today with privacy rules. We want to be careful about targeting children and putting out messaging around financials and, you know, several different things. So just watch out for that thing. Okay, thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead and take a look through this document. I'm just watching the time here. The one thing I would mention to you would be if you feel like there's something that's really, really a gray area and you aren't quite sure, here is an email address, brand@toastmasters.org, that you can email to, and they could answer very specific questions for you. But I encourage you to review the remainder of this document, especially if you're getting, you're doing your website. So I've mentioned in previous communications about PR awards at the end of the year, and best website is one of those. But I can guarantee you one of the things we're going to be looking at is, have you built a website that conveys that professional image and includes the proper colors according to the brand, and puts Toastmasters and puts the district in the best light possible. Okay, so please go ahead and take a look through the guidelines. That'll be your Bible. Keep in mind that there will be some gray areas and you'll need to do your best. You're welcome to ask questions if you'd like to do that. For me as a PRM, I just simply can't police everything. So that's why I'm just doing the training, is just to help you understand what's in the guidelines so that you can then take that as VP PRs and go and interpret it best for your target audience and for what you need to accomplish, while also still putting the Toastmasters brand front and center and really becoming that brand ambassador. Okay, so the recommendations here, again, not policing everything, consult the brand manual, adapt for your audience. Think about that global audience now, because we've got a lot of different things going on now with online meetings. We've got people coming in from multiple locations, multiple geographies. They're speaking multiple languages and they're across multiple generations. The compliance is really self-service with you. So knowing and understanding the guidelines and understanding where there's flexibility, and then going to world headquarters if you need to have something approved, if you believe it's visible enough and critical enough. It's more critical for me at the district level that I do that as well. Okay, so why are we even doing this? Because Toastmasters is an organization that's got decades of time behind them as a very upstanding organization. They've got trademarks in place, and the more we use the existing branded materials, we uphold and protect those trademarks. We also want to make sure that every touch point is giving a very good customer experience or member experience. So remember that at the club level, you're actually the place where each one of those members or prospects comes in and they start to have an experience with our brand. So if they come to a club and they have a great experience and they see things are very consistent and they go to 3 different clubs and they try to figure out which one, obviously you want to express your unique club's personality, but you should at least be using some branded materials like agendas and so forth, just so that people, like either their members or their guests, they can feel like they are having a consistent brand experience wherever they go. Doesn't mean everything has to look the same. But that's really the key thing here as to why to do this. So you're the key ambassadors for creating that experience, as well as the district, as well as world headquarters overall. Okay, I've talked to you about some of the resources. I put the brand manual link in the chat. You'll get these links as well after the session. If you have questions around the brand approvals, or you want to ask about trademarks and trademark usage, those are 2 email addresses you can use. I wanted to mention before we close that next week, again, in the spirit of helping our district better compete, now that we're in more of a global environment, it used to be the case that we were each one of our little clubs within the few blocks, people came around. Now people are coming from everywhere. But one of the things that has come up for me through discussions and so forth is sometimes VP PRs, they don't really know or understand what the true value of that club is, or what makes that club unique. And so what I'd like to do in this next session next week is talk through about how you can come to the point where you understand what's truly unique and different. So I encourage you to join if you'd like that additional help. Okay, with that, we've got a couple minutes. Are there any outstanding questions? that anybody has you'd like to raise around the branding discussion? Okay, Jennifer, I'm not seeing everybody, but I'm also not seeing.
So Denise just
anyone.
raised her
Oh,
hand.
okay, go ahead, please.
So what were the name, those websites that you referred to?
Oh, yeah.
That you looked at, you got pictures from?
Yeah, let me actually just break out of this session. By the way, there's an attendee survey.
Okay.
So please do fill that out before going.
And the survey is in the chat.
Okay, thank you. All right, so here is one, which is Pixabay.
Pixabay.
And I'm going to send that to everyone. And here's another one, which is iStock Photo.
iStock Photo. Okay.
And then the other one is Unsplash. Those are three that are options for you. There may be more out there. All you need to do is search for, call it like stock photography or something like this. Now, be careful about the usage rights. Each one of those sites will tell you what you can use and what you cannot use. And if you need to give attribution to that image, in other words, say this image is the property of, Jane Doe. And if you use the Toastmasters images out of their image library, let me give you that one as well. Okay. It's difficult because it's, I'm getting the controls up here and I can't get through that. Here we go. Okay, here is the link to the resource library, so you have that as well.
Oh.
Oops, okay, let me send that to everybody. Okay, and that's the resource library. All right, we are just about at time. I want to make sure we finish on time. So I've given you, I think, the majority of the links that are in the presentation. Let me actually just do that real quick, just in case there's anything. So I gave you PR brand resources, the brand manual that's actually in the same spot. Let me actually just copy all this. Logo and design elements. I'm going to give you all of this so you don't need to wait for me to distribute. Okay, and of course, let me just give you this one here. All right, there we go. So in the chat, I encourage you to copy and paste those into a separate document or a note. And I also want to encourage you to go ahead and fill out the survey. Let me know what you think and let me know what other help you need from the perspective of PR. I'm happy to do it, and I'm doing these sessions as a way just to serve our community and to make sure that we can all have a good and thriving community that lasts for the long haul. All right, and also just to help all of you as VP PRs and other club officers, obviously. Okay, any other last questions? Okay, Greg, question on PR and branding.
Yeah, the gray background that you used tonight in your presentation, is that supposed to be a certain tone of gray?
Yes, so as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, I've deliberately broken the brand, the connection to the brand here because I'm making this an unofficial training,
okay,
not an official District 4 training. So
that
color is not part of the palette.
I noticed that your background is a little darker than the gray that they recommend.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
not, the presentation slide deck is not part of the palette. It's separate, and this is a separate training. It's not meant to also replace the training that VP PRs would get at the district level. Okay. With that, then I would say it's a wrap. I want to thank you all once again. Jennifer, did you have any other announcements you want to make or anything else you want to cover?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate you all coming tonight. And I look forward to having you guys go out there and be our brand ambassadors right on the front lines. As I mentioned before, you're really that first line of contact between the members and the guests. And it's so critical for us to have a very positive brand experience across the board. I appreciate you showing up tonight, and I look forward to seeing what you do with the information you've achieved tonight in your next PR campaigns. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.